The United States military spends over $6 billion every single year on simulation-based training. Not weapons. Not equipment. Training simulations that look and function almost identically to video games. And the results they are getting are reshaping how every major institution on Earth thinks about learning. Welcome to something that most people have completely wrong. When someone says video games in education, most people picture a kid playing math puzzles on a school tablet. What is actually happening goes so much deeper than that. In the next 10 minutes, you are going to discover how games are training surgeons, preparing soldiers, rewiring how students absorb information, and producing measurable outcomes that traditional education has failed to achieve for decades. And the most counterintuitive part, the finding that genuinely stopped researchers in their tracks, is coming up later in this video. Stay with us. To understand where we are today, you have to go back further than most people expect. The connection between games and learning is not a product of the digital age. It is ancient. Chess was developed over 1500 years ago specifically as a tool to train military strategists. Prussian military officers in the early 1800s used a war simulation called Kriegspiel, which translates directly to war game, to rehearse battlefield decisions without risking a single life. The fundamental idea, that a simulated environment allows you to practice high-stakes decisions safely, has been around for centuries. What changed is the technology. The first real bridge between digital games and formal education came in 1971 with a program called Oregon Trail. Developed by student teachers in Minnesota, it placed players in charge of guiding a wagon party across the American frontier, forcing them to manage resources, make survival decisions, and confront the consequences of poor planning. It was eventually installed on millions of school computers and became one of the most widely used educational tools of its era. It was not flashy. It was not action-packed. But it worked because it made the consequences of decisions feel real. By the 1980s and 1990s, the idea of serious games, games designed with a primary purpose beyond entertainment, began to gain academic traction. Flight simulators, which had existed in basic form since the 1940s, became increasingly sophisticated and were adopted universally by commercial aviation. Today, every licensed commercial pilot in the world has logged significant hours in a simulator before ever taking control of a real aircraft. The Federal Aviation Administration requires it. The data supporting this approach is overwhelming. Studies show that simulator-trained pilots demonstrate faster reaction times and better emergency decision-making than those trained exclusively through traditional instruction. Now here is where things get genuinely interesting. The same neurological mechanisms that make entertainment games compelling, the dopamine release tied to progress, the immediate feedback loops, the escalating challenge structure, are the exact same mechanisms that make game-based learning stick in a way that lectures simply cannot replicate. A lecture delivers information. A game forces you to use it. And that distinction is everything. Research published in the journal Educational Psychology Review analyzed over 77 studies on game-based learning and found that students who learned through games scored on average 11% higher on assessments than students who received conventional instruction. That is not a marginal difference. That is a significant, replicable, peer-reviewed gap in outcomes. And it held across age groups, subjects, and cultural contexts. The medical field is one of the most compelling examples of this shift in action. Surgeons at the University of Texas Medical Branch began incorporating a game called Underground, designed to simulate laparoscopic procedures, into their training program. The results were striking. Surgeons who trained with the game made 37% fewer errors during actual procedures compared to those who trained without it. Think about what that means in a real operating room. Fewer errors. Real patients. Real lives. The game works because laparoscopic surgery requires manipulating instruments through tiny incisions while watching a screen, a skill set that maps almost perfectly onto the hand-eye coordination and spatial reasoning trained by video games. The simulation is not a gimmick. It is a genuinely effective rehearsal environment for a genuinely complex physical skill. But here is what nobody talks about when this subject comes up. The most powerful educational applications of games are not happening in schools or medical programs. They are happening inside corporations, and the results are changing how billions of dollars in training budgets are being allocated. Deloitte, one of the largest professional services firms on earth, integrated a game-based learning platform into its leadership training program and tracked the results over time. Employees who completed game-based modules were 47% more engaged in training and completed certification programs at significantly higher rates than those using traditional e-learning modules. The company reported a dramatic reduction in the time needed to complete leadership training without any loss in knowledge retention. That last part is critical. Faster training, no drop in quality. IBM, PwC, and Walmart have all made similar investments. Walmart trained over 1 million employees using VR simulation to prepare for Black Friday crowd management. Workers who went through the VR training performed measurably better during actual high-volume shopping events. They reported feeling more confident, responded more calmly to customer conflicts, and made better real-time decisions. This is not theoretical. These are companies with massive accountability for outcomes, and they are doubling down on games and simulations because the return on investment is real. The United States Army developed a game called America's Army back in 2002 as both a recruitment tool and a training aid. What started as a public-facing strategy game evolved into one of the most sophisticated soldier training simulators ever built. The platform has been continuously updated and is used for everything from squad-level tactical decision-making to cultural sensitivity training for overseas deployments. Independent researchers who studied its effectiveness found that soldiers who trained on the platform demonstrated faster adaptation to real-world scenarios compared to those who received only conventional training protocols. Here is another number worth sitting with. According to a report by the e-learning industry, game-based learning increases knowledge retention by up to 90% compared to retention rates of roughly 10% from traditional lectures. 10%. If you sat in a lecture today, statistically speaking, you will remember almost none of it by next week. But if you engage with the same material through an interactive, consequence-driven game environment, the retention curve looks completely different. The reason comes down to how memory is formed. Memory consolidation is strengthened by emotional engagement, repetition, and contextual relevance. Games deliver all three simultaneously. When you fail in a game and try again, you are not just repeating information. You are encoding the lesson through experience. Neuroscientists call this procedural memory formation, and it is dramatically more durable than the declarative memory formed during passive learning. This brings us to Minecraft Education Edition, which deserves its own conversation. Microsoft developed it as a formal curriculum tool, and it is now used in over 115 countries. Teachers have used it to teach geometry, history, environmental science, coding, and even social-emotional learning. Students build ancient civilizations, model climate systems, write and test code in a visual environment, and collaborate with peers across the world. The platform does not replace curriculum. It provides a living, interactive space where curriculum becomes something students actually do rather than something they sit and absorb. The implications for the future of education are significant and still unfolding. We are moving toward a world where the distinction between a classroom and a game environment is going to become genuinely blurred. Adaptive learning games that adjust difficulty and content in real time based on individual performance are already commercially available. Artificial intelligence is being layered into these platforms to personalize the learning path for each student in ways that a single teacher managing 30 students simply cannot replicate manually. What all of this tells us is that the instinct to separate play from learning was always a cultural assumption, not a biological one. Children learn through play from birth. The educational game revolution is not introducing something foreign to human development. It is returning to something deeply native to how our brains are actually built to acquire skill and knowledge. The data is clear. The examples are real. The investment from governments, militaries, medical institutions, and corporations is not slowing down. It is accelerating. Before you go, if you learned something valuable today, hit that like button right now. Subscribe to Pixel Pulse for a brand new video every single day. We will see you in the next one.